quite a few months ago. And so this is something that has been a journey for me. I've been an alcohol drug counselor, social worker, mental health counselor for a whole bunch of years, personal work together. And so most of what we were taught in grad school and most of what we did is what's called the top-down approach to therapy. And recently there's been more of an approach to bottom-up. And so it's something that makes a lot of sense to me. Sometimes I get nervous, so I'm talking too fast and I'm breathing too shallow. So sometimes, so it's something that I really think makes a lot of sense. It's something that is a felt sense of being able to be present rather than just figuring things out with the mind. So the emphasis is going to be on the bottom-up approaches, but we're going to go through a little bit of this. Okay, from this which way? It's so easy.
Down button.
Okay. Okay. So most people do want to change, and there's different ways to change. So like I said, the top-down approach is a cognitive-based therapy, which is what we do with our minds, our prefrontal cortex. So our prefrontal cortex is engaged when we're talking, when we're trying to figure things out. So a lot of times, we may try to figure out, why do I do what I do? What's the pattern? So that's all cognitive-based. So our frontal lobe is known as our command center. It's where we make decisions, where we do problem solving, where we have logic. So it's learning and recalling information, our social understanding, and even our voluntary muscle movements. We think about doing that. So on the other hand, the bottom up is the focus on our sensations, our felt sense. I can feel my feet on the ground. I can feel a little bit of anxiety in my chest. So those are also part of our emotions and our implicit memories. So I'll get a little bit more into the implicit memories in a minute. So all of that is part of our limbic brain, our limbic system. So that's in the center here. It's kind of like a horseshoe shape system. And so there's the structures of the hippocampus, the amygdala, and the hypothalamus. So all of those structures work together to create our implicit memories. And so there's two sides. So you have two amygdalas, two hippocampus, and all that. So has anyone heard of the amygdala? Okay. So sometimes people call it Amy. You can kind of see Amy in the amygdala. So Amy gets all excited and gets scared, and so Amy sends out these, stress signals that says, you better get prepared because something bad might be happening. So that's another way of being able to think about the sympathetic nervous system. So the implicit memory relies on our structures in the brain, and they're actually fully developed, at birth. So we come with all that, and so that's why we now know that in the womb we can experience, feelings. We're experiencing, the things that mom's gone through, and so to me that's just really fascinating. And probably a lot of us knew that, but now there's more proof that that's, kind of what happens. So there are also unconscious long-term memories that are formed through repetition. So implicit memories like riding a bike, is typing or playing the piano, tying our shoes. So we learn it and we don't have to think about it later. Explicit memory comes online around the age of 3. So, because again, that's using more of the prefrontal cortex. So, not really a scientist, not really, into high-tech biology, so this is kind of like a overview. But, okay, I already said that there's different types of implicit memories. So procedural, it's like tying your shoes. Priming is recognizing a picture or word very quickly because you've seen it 1,000 times. Conditional responses is another form of implicit memory. So it's an emotional response to a stimulus, such as a smell or a noise. So now we're kind of getting into what a trigger could be, right? That there's a certain scent, and it could be a positive or negative, and that scent reminds you of an experience or it reminds you of somebody. So again, if it's a positive and you smell that scent, that person's not around, but you're immediately going to probably think of that person. And again, it can have a negative or a positive connotation. So all that's happening without any conscious effort. So implicit memory shows up as perceptions, somatic sensory, so soma is our body, and emotional, and in our behavioral responses. So most trauma memories are implicit, so they can't be easily recalled in a chronological manner. So it's kind of like the invisible fence or forces that impact us. So, and this talk isn't really specifically about trauma, but we've all had trauma, to one degree or another. And so I think being able to understand the biological, some of the chemical, the memory parts of what trauma is all about, and how to have that healing. So that's kind of what we are talking about here. Okay, and you know what? You can ask questions. I forgot to say that. If you have a question or if you have a thought, comment, this really isn't a lecture.
So I do.
Okay, good.
Back when we were doing the Bataan Death March, 200 clients and all the notes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We thought we were hot shit when we thought it was a disease. That was the disease model. And we were hammering people with the disease model. And then AA took them the rest of the way, and we just did the aftercare notes. I really love what you're doing and saying, because the science has come so far, and they say half measures avail us nothing, and often it felt like I was doing half measures, because what I conceptualize now is, and this is just me, those behaviors, addictions, are the low-hanging fruit. It's what everybody can see, and that's what you want to deal with. But I think as you're talking about the tree, how did they get there and where did it come from? So I'm interested to see how you're going to get them from the fruit to deal with what's going on the inside.
Yeah.
And then I'm just going to throw this out now because I can't sit there any longer with it. Carl Jung would say the conscious subconscious is the root. So I'm excited about looking at the fruit, figuring out what's going on in the body, and then wondering if we could get to the root and pull it up so that tree is gone. So I'm where you're at, and I'm going backwards, like I see you, not actually, it's forward. What we've done, I think, was way too late. But it's all a process, so.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it really has been 40 years for me that I've been in this field. And there have been lots and lots of changes, movements. And, when we were all called drug counselors, that whole idea of confront, you know. And some people took a lot of pride in how good they could confront, you know, make somebody cry or whatever. And so we really have come a long ways. And so I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, but Steve Porges is the guy that is talking about polyvagal theory. And he wrote the book like 25 years ago. Besser Vanderkolk wrote his book, The Body Keeps the Score, 25 years ago or whatever. But it's taken this long to be able to get it to like my level. And not to brag or anything, but there's a lot of people that I know that are doing what I'm doing, but they're not interested in finding out more about these newer approaches because they're just happy as a lark going with CBT or DBT. You know, and those are gold standard treatments, but I just have found, for me, that they're still limited. So I kind of like that you're shaking your head. So,
And I just want to say, I'm happy to see you not be one of those people. Because I remember when we were all those people trying to figure it out, but some of us had something else we wanted to know.
Yeah.
And I appreciate, I see that that's happened with you, and I applaud that.
Thank you.
I'm not, telling you you're okay, I'm just saying, but you might not be, so I'm not.
Yeah, and so, because I think of Besser Vanderkolk and Stephen Porges, there's been a whole plethora now of different bottom-up approaches, and so, can't think of his name right now. The guy that did Internal Family Systems, Frank Anderson is one of them, that he trained under the author. But the whole point is that I'm happy that there's some people in the field that have really, really put in a lot of extra dedication and time and effort to really say, hey, here's how this can work. Okay, so again, just really, really quick, there's the brain kind of like developed in 3 different stages. So the reptilian brain is like the first there. That's the brain that developed first among humans. And then the emotional brain, and the executive functioning brain. Okay. So again, I am going to talk a little bit about trauma. So during trauma, the amygdala becomes overactive, heightening emotional imprinting. So the amygdala gets all excited, and so it's, trauma's happening. The hippocampus is suppressed, disrupting memory organization. So we can't always remember everything when we are in a trauma situation. This explains why the hippocampus got suppressed. The brain focuses on survival cues, not this whole scene. So now I'm in trauma, something traumatic is happening. I'm only trying to focus on how am I going to survive this. So it's not seeing, the rest of the stuff that's going on. Dissociation may occur, breaking the continuity of memory. So, you space out. And chronic trauma compounds the fragmentation over time. So there can be a traumatic event, or we can be living in a traumatic home or traumatic work environment. And so it may not be big every day, but it's not normal. It's not reliable. It's not dependable. And so that makes things unsafe. So then target rock is, so as a result, traumatic memories often emerge as disconnected images, sensations, or emotional states rather than coherent story. So I know that different times when something major happens to me, 5 minutes later I can't tell you. I cannot give you the rundown, And so one of the things that I found is that when I start to learn information, then I go, oh, okay, I'm not so weird, or I'm not so broken, this is what happened. a lot of good stuff to say. So, trauma can have a lot of different definitions, but, the fact that it's a severed belonging, it's a disconnection from ourselves and from others. Okay, so, it's noon, right? That we stopped.
Yeah.
Okay. So, again, here's some of the examples of top-down cognitive behavior therapy, dialectical behavior therapy, known as DBT. That's one of the approaches that we use with mostly borderline personality disorder patients. Solution-focused therapy, there's more. But again, that all engages just usually the brain. You identify unhealthy thoughts, you challenge them, you replace those unhealthy thoughts, irrational thoughts with something that's more realistic. A lot of times you're given homework to do, kind of like try different experiential activities, so you're kind of scared, so let's just approach it little by little. So again, it's behavioral and cognitive. And so, some of the questions that we might ask somebody, well, where's the evidence for that thought? So, say telling the therapist that I feel that a lot of people don't like me. And so the therapist would say, well, where's the evidence? And so then I said, well, it seems like when I walk down the hallway, people hardly ever smile at me. Sometimes they kind of give me a weird look. And so I just think that they don't like me. And so the therapist is going to say, well, is there another way for you to think about that? And then they kind of prompt and say, well, maybe, they just were having a bad day. And maybe they were walking down the hallway preoccupied with something, so it may not have been about you. And I go, oh, well, yeah, maybe so, maybe you're right. So that's kind of like the CBT approach. So the idea is that if somebody can help me change my thought, or if I change my thought, it's going to change my feeling, and then it's going to change my behavior. So that's the premise of that. So on the other hand, the bottom-up approach, some of the examples of that are internal family systems, which is parts therapy, which I'm going to talk about. Somatic experiencing, which is kind of a global thing of being able to be in your body, and so we'll say, what kind of movement does your body want to make? I think I want to push. Well, go ahead and push them. And so you push, what does that feel like? So it's different, because again, Bessel van der Kolk says, when we experience trauma, it is stored in our body. It's stored, and we can't really think it out, right? We can't say, well, okay, it's been 20 years, goodbye. It doesn't work that way. So somatic experiencing, expressive arts therapy, dance, those are movements that can really help, resolve some of that. So the idea is that we approach our bodies or systems with curiosity, paying attention to sensations, and using energy. So again, it's a tuning in. It's not this. So it can be move your shoulders so your chest becomes open. And what do you notice? And even when I do that, kind of, it's like, I feel more empowered. I feel kind of like, okay. So it's really, really, again, this tuning in. Where in your body, around your body, do you sense anger? So again, anger is somewhere. And, I talked to a lot of people, and I think anger is one of those things that when anger piles up and piles up and piles up and piles up and piles up, then a person usually is really scared to start letting that anger out. Now, I've said this for years, because courts often will tell people that they got to go to 10 anger management classes, and so I'm like, anger management, I don't want to have to manage my anger all the time. I want to release my anger. So just the name, anger management, just sounds to me. But again, you know, there's folks that, the picture I always give them is that, you know, you shove that anger in that gunny sack, you shove the anger in the gunny sack, and you keep shoving it in, and pretty soon it's so big, and then you get real scared, you gotta keep tying the noose tighter and tighter, and then sometimes, you know, the noose comes out, you know, you have this explosion, and people are really scared of that, you know. And so, again, being able to approach that in a more somatic way, I think is more helpful. Okay, so the intensity of our reaction is linked to the severity of the event. So there's two parts to that. So, you know, of course, the more serious it is, the more of the event, you know, maybe a serious car accident or whatever it may be, we're gonna have a bigger, longer reaction. And it's also connected to our attachment that we have as children. And I'm not even gonna go into that,
Yeah.
that would be another piece of the whole puzzle. But there's, you know, secure attachment, there's disorganized attachment, there's, you know, two other kinds of attachment.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have an answer. What percentage of the people that we know living now had a healthy attachment?
Yeah, gosh, I don't know what the percentage would be, but.
Guess. I don't know either, I'm just wondering.
Yeah, golly. I don't even know what a guess would be. 50%, less than 50%?
How many?
50%, less than 50%, you know. Yeah, and you know, it's really important to have caregivers that are reliable, nurturing, steady, you know, so that, you know, if you have gotten that, you don't need to cry about that. You know, if you've gotten unvalidated, disvalidated, whatever, if you weren't validated, then it creates, you know, an insecure type of attachment, you know. So yeah, it has a lot to play into how our relationships are formed. But the good news is that we're learning we can help integrate the fragments of ourselves and have some resolution. So, the good news. So, and you know, I used to, honestly, I would be talking to people, clients, and then I get to a certain point and say, and then I don't know what else to tell you.
Yeah.
I'm kind of stumped, you know. And now I know that self-compassion is the pathway. I didn't know that before. And really think about that. Self-compassion is our pathway to healing. Because I'm sure that I'm not the only one in this room that has a real critical part. You know, that you know, tells me that I'm not good enough, I didn't work on this hard enough, I should have done this, I shouldn't have done that. You know, that there's this critical part that you know, that a lot of times we think if we're hard on ourselves, it'll help make us do better the next time. So the opposite is really true, that when we can take a compassionate self or a compassionate focus to ourselves. So some of those elements of compassion are, you know, courage, you know, tapping into our courage, tapping into a sense of calm, being curious about what it is that's happening to us and with us. You know, having a curious approach, not a judgmental approach. So Tara Brach has come up with this RAIN concept. So I wanted to introduce it to you because you know, it's something that you can do on your own. And so it's a tool for bringing mindfulness and compassion to emotional difficulty. It's about nurturing your inner life with self-care. So, going through the day, something upsets you, or you read the news, you know. My daughter gets really emotional about the news and stuff. And so, recognize what's happening. My mood changed. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling disgusted. I'm feeling, you know, something shifted in me. So recognize that. And then A, allow the experience to be there. So many times we like, look, we don't want it, and so we just, you know, try to dismiss it and keep on going. So allow the experience to be there. Allow for the feeling of disgust. Allow for that feeling of frustration or sadness. You know, investigate it with interest and care. I like those words. Interest and care. What's that all about? You know, that sense of disgust that I'm feeling. Well, it may be because I really have a heart for humanity. You know, I really have, you know, it is so sad that people are capable of doing whatever it is that they do. And that's very upsetting. And so, you know, it just taps into that sense of, you know, my caringness. And then nurture that part of you with that self-compassion. You know, let that part feel the experience, feel you know, that it is good that you have that part, that caring part for humanity, or that moral part of who you are, you know, the principles of who you are. You know, to be able to, you know, kind of say, well, we want to let that go. You know, we want to deaden all that, you know, to protect ourselves from the feeling of sadness. So it's you know, integrating all that and just seeing yourself as a person. So is that making sense? Okay, good. So how many do it that way and how many do it the other way? Of, you know, being like feeling that, you know, let me go watch some TV. You know? And I think that's the other thing that mental health providers have done. We've kind of done a disservice, I think. With DBT, a lot of it is about distraction skills. And so the idea is that when you start to feel a little bit of overwhelm, you may want to distract yourself from getting too overwhelmed. And so, you know, some of the distraction skills are listen to music, watch some TV, go exercise, and do different things. But it can't stop there. You know, maybe we feel a little bit better, but that we haven't resolved anything. You know, so I really think that mental health providers have done a disservice by just telling people, you know, go listen to music. In the diary, develop a playlist. You know, this is the richer experience. Right? This helps you to really know what's happening on your inner world.
Do you relate that to past experiences as well? Memory.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, something comes up, you notice that you're triggered, you know, and so then you can go, oh, okay, here's the feelings, here's why, here's where I've been, here's where yeah.
How difficult do you find people able to accurately express what they're feeling?
Yeah, that's a challenge for a lot of people. So again, you know, I still do groups, and so every time I do a group, I always say to them, we're going to go around the room and we're going to find out how you're feeling. And I say, good, okay, fine, all right, aren't feelings. And so I say that every time, and I go around, and someone says, I feel all right. And I go, yeah, you know, all right, it's not a feeling, it's kind of generic, try to figure out a feeling word. And I'll give feeling words: calm, relaxed, frustrated, irritated. I don't know, I feel all right, So it's really hard for a lot of people to tap in.
Why is that?
Because I don't think we're taught. We're not taught, feeling words. And so it just, we just go throughout our day with, yeah, I'm feeling all right. Or I think, or I'm ticked off. We just don't know some of those more subtle feelings.
Sitting here listening to you talk, when we were back to the top-down thing, I'm not in the mental health field. I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist or any of those zoologists, but I've encountered a lot of them in my life. I've been to quite a few of them in my life, and it seems like a lot of them do practice this top-down thing. And it's like, I've been taking notes here while you're talking. But to me, when I looked, it seems like it's a quick fix. Like, okay, identify your feelings, and then what do you say, feeling, and then, what can you do to change that feeling here and now? Like, okay, instead of getting all nervous and upset, distract yourself with something or whatever. But it doesn't feel to me like it's getting to the root of the problem. And I think that's my frustration with any type of therapy I'm in. I'm not getting to it. Am I thinking correctly with this top-down theory that it's just more of a fix what you're feeling now and not really resolving what's going on in your life?
I think so, people can be involved in, therapy for months, and maybe you drill down, over years, yeah, maybe they may be drilling down deeper and deeper, but yeah, I think that's why I just never gravitated to it completely, and that's why I like what I'm learning now, because, we're going to do some imagery work, and it'll be really interesting to see how you guys view that and experience it, because it's experiential, so that's kind of the biggest difference. Cognitive behavior therapy, solutions-focused therapy, DBT are not really experiential, but the somatic experiencing is. It's experiential with noticing it in your body. It's experiential with the imagery work, and it's really powerful.
Sometimes I think of it like therapy in general is symptom relief.
Yeah.
Go to the pharmacist, get a prescription, take it as directed. If it don't work, it's because you didn't take it right. Blame the patient.
Right, yeah.
Somatic stuff is more like going to the Cleveland Clinic and actually sitting down and finding out what the specialty thing is we need to focus on from the inside, rather than what are your symptoms on the outside.
Yeah. Let me share just a little bit, a personal private thing. So I decided that I was going to go into therapy, because the therapist couldn't fix the therapist. and it's been a long, long time. But I think I really didn't want to go to somebody that was just going to be, mind to mind. So, so there's a person in Canton that does internal family systems, and that's what I really wanted to present to people. But I don't want to really present it until I experienced it. So initially I thought 3 sessions I should be good. I'm out of here, and so I'm still going. And I didn't know, well, it was a long time ago that a friend said to me, Karen, I think it's safe to say that you grew up in a dysfunctional family. And I went, huh? And she goes, well, based on some of the things that you told me, you grew up in a dysfunctional family. And I'm still putting that together, because it wasn't a, an alcoholic parent or this or that. It was this subtle stuff. And so anyways, part of my imagery and things like that, I felt and sensed myself in the womb, in my mom's womb, and well, what does it look like? What's that experience like? And I said, it's dry. And I said, there's like pores, there's kind of splitters. And so it was what happened in my head. And so I went ahead and I drew it later, and so it's not a image in my mind that I cringe at, but it kind of feels nice that I now have a representation of what it seems like it felt like for me to be carried in my mother's womb. And so I think a lot of what I've had to deal with started then. You know, it's crazy as that sounds, but I don't think it sounds crazy, does it? And so then the healing then can be, you know, some of my imagery of how I can change that. 65 years, 66 almost years later, you know, I can work on changing that imagery. I can work on changing that experience. So, so to me, that's a whole lot different than like the symptom, you know, relief, or the, you know, cognitive behavior stuff. So, because if we were just talking, you know, I wouldn't have come up with that picture, you know, right? But it was like, you know, tuning in, and so anyways.
I just said interesting.
Yeah. Any other thoughts?
So when you talk about that regression into the womb and those feelings, is that something that you've experienced through like hypnosis, or is that something that you have just, how do you know it's not something that you just created in the creative side of your brain to kind of cope and create your own answer to the problems that you've experienced?
Yeah. I did get trained in hypnosis. So it doesn't really matter. You know,
Yeah, I mean, I guess really at the end of the day, right, what's the goal? It's to be able to deal with the trauma and stuff, right?
Yeah, and that's our head, you know, that gets in the way of trying to figure out, you know, am I making this up? You know, is this right or is it wrong? And so, as long as, you know, it's working for you and it comes up, you know, whether it's in hypnosis or whether it's just in more of a internal family systems that doesn't go down into regression for relaxation. It just surfaces. It will come up, and I think it's trusting that whatever it comes up is what's supposed to come up.
It's almost happens automatically.
Yeah.
And no matter how hard you work on yourself, and following rain, for myself, a situation that it will bring on anxiety like that. And you can feel it internally, like your heart starts beating faster, you get excited and scared, and it's hard to explain.
Yeah.
I think some of those feelings can come up, or those knowings can come up in meditation.
When get more still, right? Yeah.
So I'll start with a statement about, you know, I would assume that you see yourself as a wounded healer, and I'll let you respond to that in a moment. Then also, like, there's a saying that wounded people or hurt people hurt other people, but also hurt people also help to heal other people. And then the last portion of that would be, do you develop compassion for people because they've been hurt and help them to work through that and maybe to find more appropriate ways of channeling that hurt and that energy from that experience?
Yeah, all of those things. And, you know, hurt people hurt other people, you know, because we're doing the best that we can. And, but, you know, we get triggered in relationships, you know. But yeah, we can really channel that where, you know, we have that compassion for other people because we know what, you know, pain feels like. It's a good thing.
Yeah, I've often thought that too. I've always said that expression, hurt people. But I've always thought, you know, if you, for example, broke an arm, you know what it feels like. So why would you want to break somebody else's arm? Why would you want them to feel that pain when you know what it feels like?
Right. Yeah. When I talk a little bit more about the parts, we'll get into a little bit more of that explanation too. I think it's coming up soon. Okay. So these are some of the questions that you can ask yourself when you're into rain. You know, calling on your natural curiosity, but the desire to understand what's going on inside, paying attention to your felt sense. So, you know, what most wants my attention? What am I believing? What am I believing about this situation? What does this vulnerable place want from me? What does it most need? So those are just some questions that you can add to it. And I did bring a handout about rain for everybody, hopefully everybody. Okay, so internal family systems. This is what I wrote over like. So Richard Schwartz, that's the guy. I couldn't think of it a second ago. So he was a family therapist, doing family therapy stuff, and so you know, parents come in, different people, and they talk to each other, and he kind of realized that everybody has those same kind of parts internally. One person has all these parts. So, so here's just some of the things that he believes: that there are no bad parts. That that we may have behavior that does bad things, but he believes that there's no bad parts. That having parts is a natural state of our mind. We're born this way. So, you know, again, we can say, part of me feels this way, another part feels this way, part of me does that some of the time, another part does this. So I'll explain a little bit more as we go. But each part is designed to protect and support us, and it's linked to our nervous system states. So the different parts going to show up when we're in the sympathetic nervous state, which is the fight flight. The different part will show up if we're in dorsal, which is the collapse energy. Different parts will show up when we're in ventral, which is kind of the normal social engagement state. So it's about forming healthy relationships with our parts. To witness them, to talk to them, reassure them, give them permission to rest or play. And this is how change happens. So it's really, really cool that the idea is to have a relationship with our parts. To not be in that, I hate this part of me, or I hate when I do this. You know, not that. But to be having that curiosity and that appreciation and understanding that when this part does this, it's because something actually had gotten activated. So, keep going. So, trauma, neglect, cultural messages, attachment injuries create burdens. So, that's the name for our wounded parts, called burdens. And these parts carry fear and terror, shame, unworthiness, feelings of being unlovable. So we have those parts probably inside of ourselves, and a lot of times they end up getting covered up, shut down. Burdens carry extreme core beliefs about ourselves, and they carry that energetic imprint of the trauma. So that's that trapped part that's inside of us. The burdens are not the part's natural states. Burdens end up creating parts that go into overdrive that often look like rigid rules or sabotaging behaviors. So again, to protect that woundedness, the part that feels unlovable, the part that feels ashamed, part that's just doesn't feel good about itself. There's other roles that other parts of ourselves will play. Some of them are, like I said, very rigid or sabotaging. So, two ways of thinking about burdens. One way is to think about it as a virus that gets attached to the system, and so it's running throughout our system, making us the more that we forget what's really underneath. So, that makes sense, right? So, this is a shift from pathologizing behavior. So I really, really, really like this because, you know, we have the diagnostic manual and statistical manual. It used to be this thick, now it's that thick because politics. And so, you know, we think that people's antisocial, people's narcissistic, people's borderline, people's this, people's that, you know, and so you get this big fat diagnosis that carries, you know, a lot of weight, and then you're stuck with it. And then the sad part again is that, you know, in this mental health system, you know, we say, well, you know, you have borderline personality disorder, or you are bipolar. And then people start to walk around going, well, then my bipolar kicked in, you know, or you know, after all, I am, you know, borderline. And so then it becomes just this label that they just kind of accept, that they think that that's their identity. And it's not. That is not who you are. But again, I think as mental health providers, you know, we got the diagnosis for you. So there you go. So, when we're looking at it from a parts perspective, it all makes sense. Okay, so talked about that already. You know, but you know, we're always kind of into the self-evaluation, looking at ourselves, and we tend to see ourselves, you know, as not good people or good human beings. We tend to think that there's something inherently wrong with me or weird. So, Richard Schwartz, talking to lots of people on this, said that once he started looking at all these parts, that he found self. And so self is at the center, and all these little spokes are parts of play. And so self is our essence. Self instead seems to not end up getting traumatized. Self somehow survives. And so the idea is to be able to find that self again. And there's a little bit of difference, like self-energy, self-identity. So self-energy is our state of being, is the energy of the self qualities. So calm, courageous, caring, curious, those are aspects of the self that the trauma somehow doesn't take away. Self-identity, the difference is that's how we see ourselves. That's what comes up because of our history, of all of our experiences, that we tend to then see our self-identity. Okay, so managers are one of the ways that parts show up to protect the burdens. So the managers can show up as perfectionistic people. It's like looking good, right? Or people pleasing, excessive planning, controlling. So see how this is so cool? It's a part. It's not, you know, and then again we may label, you know, oh, we're so perfectionistic. We're so controlling, you know, we label it, we are frustrated by it, maybe, you know, annoyed by it, annoyed with ourselves because, you know, I mean, I'm perfectionistic, trying to let go of that. But the job is being proactive. The job is to make sure that the exile doesn't get triggered. So if I'm carrying a burden, and usually it's an unconscious thing, that, you know, I'm not good enough, then it makes sense that I'm going to try to be perfect, right? It makes sense that I'm trying to do the very, very best that I can so that that part that feels unworthy, not good enough, doesn't get triggered. So I'm going to work like crazy to be really good, to do everything the way that you want it done. I'm going to show up super duper irresponsible. Or I'm going to be really organized and whole lot of planning so that, you know, I don't have to worry about something not going right, because it really gets scared when things don't go right. So, make sense? Okay, the firefighters, their job is to protect the exile from feeling vulnerable or hurt, and it doesn't matter what the cost is. So this is kind of where, you know, addiction comes in, where, you know, I start smoking marijuana, I'm 12 years old, I've had a heck of a childhood already, and so I'm not smoking because I'm just curious about it, I'm smoking because I don't want to feel what I'm feeling. I want to protect myself, and so, doesn't matter if I start to not care about school, doesn't matter if my grades slip, doesn't matter about those things. It just, you know, I'm all about making sure that I'm protecting the burden. Okay. Overeating could be another one. Cutting is, you know, from the outside it looks like cutting is like a terrible, you know, approach to living life. But again, it's a way of being able to feel the pain, or escape the internal pain, going on shopping sprees, having angry outbursts, thrill seeking. These are all, you know, examples of the firefighters that arrive on the scene and distracts you and doesn't allow for the burden to feel this feeling. So again, it's not pathology, you know, it's not, it is just simply protection. And our bodies are designed for that, to survive, to keep on living. So I think the message is that it's a game changer when you stop seeing the parts as problems and you start seeing the burdens as a thing in need of loving attention. So that's where you don't have to rip out the tree. You just say, hey, here's the tree. I can really, you know, give it my loving attention. I can really look at the root of all of this that's happening with compassion and care and all those things. So, because again, I think that we're into, let's just get rid of it. You know? And when you do parts work, you know, you don't have to get rid of it, but you get to the point where you say to them, you know, you probably don't have to show up, you know, this mighty as you do. You know, you might, you know, you really can kind of take a back seat, you know, see what happens, you know, start to trust that, you know, other parts can handle this situation. Okay, so it's no longer about fixing ourselves, it's about learning to be with ourselves. Again, it's a paradigm shift, I think. Learn how to be with ourselves. All right. So a loving presence, that self with, you know, that's that energy, has wisdom, is not injured in the trauma, is the source from which energy flows. So Richard Schwartz started out as an atheist and has now really become a very spiritual kind of guy. Self offers gentle guidance to the parts and brings love to the parts, thereby transforming fear, self-loathing, and anxiety to a sense of well-being and connectedness. So, through all the work and the questioning and the imagery and things like that, that's kind of the thing that you want to get to. Okay. So accessing self-energy, the clues when you're there is when you feel like you're at your best, when you feel like you are whole and complete. So, you know, other people may say this or explain this like when you're in the zone, you know, and time passes, but you know, it doesn't feel like time's passing because you're just enjoying whatever that is. That's self-energy. So that's kind of how you know. Or, sometimes, you know, it's like when you get goosebumps and that tingling feeling, you know, something's really, really resonating with you, and that's part of the sound. It may be like a calm power or a flow state. So, the idea is that in parts therapy, you want to liberate the extreme parts, and you don't want them to have to keep doing what they're doing. Unburden the wounded parts, you know, discover those parts, restore trust in self, so that you can become more self-led with that positive self-energy, and that helps give you harmony and balance. So, again, different than cognitive behavior therapy that says, why don't you just look at this in a different way, you know? So, alright. And they also have done lots and lots of research that change happens in relationships. So, we really can't change all by ourselves. You know, it does happen with supportive people around us. But also, you know, when you think about having a relationship with our parts, so changing those relationships is how healing happens. Okay, so, yeah, we're good. I want to go ahead, and I didn't want to do anything related to finding a wounded part or finding and talking about any of your firefighters or your managers, because, you know, it's a group setting, and, you know, I didn't want to do that. So what I thought I would do, and it's never been done before, so this is, but it came to me yesterday, and I thought, why don't we really focus in on our helpful parts? And actually, I started thinking about it a few days ago, and I really wasn't sure how I was going to do it, you know, what it was going to be like, and I get emails from Nami every Friday, and what was really kind of cool was that email was about helpful parts of ourselves. And so I kind of felt like, well, that's a confirmation that, you know, that's what I need to do, is talk about the helpful parts, our strengths. And so what we'll do is kind of like semi-meditation, where I like to get the system calm. Everybody's looking pretty calm right now, but going within. And then we're going to meet some of your helpful parts, and you're going to get a chance to relate to them and kind of guide you through that. And don't get too far ahead, you know, because maybe your imagination will go, oh. But I kind of want you to stick with the guidance that I'm going to give, so that it will make sense at the end. And then hopefully, you know, some of you will be wanting to talk a little bit about it. And I think that's when you kind of see the uniqueness of all of us. You know, you find that in the sharing and the caring is also very, very helpful. So does that sound okay? Okay. So first of all, I'm going to get the rest of my notes. Any other questions about any of this? So this is the NAMI handout, and so I didn't count how many there are, but these are like the strengths that are our helpful parts. So being honest, you know, is a strength, as a part of who we may be. Being kind, thoughtful, trustworthy, being grateful, caring, funny or having a sense of humor, resilient, humble, responsible, insightful, brave, optimistic. These are all strengths, parts. Being patient, appreciative, forgiving, empathetic, persistent, hopeful, being a leader, feeling smart, artistic, capable, being understanding, loyal, creative, independent, determined, cooperative, adventurous, strength, confident, curious, helpful, hardworking, reliable, good at sharing, good at learning, accepting of others, being non-judgmental, self-started. So, we may have looked at these as strengths before, but today I'm calling them parts. So as I was thinking about this, last night a little bit more, and wanting to explain it, I thought to myself, okay, what parts do I have that I feel are helpful? So I came up with determined. So there's a determined part inside of me. And so then I'm like, okay, how does determination show up? So here's two little tiny examples. My daughter had a piece of clothing that needed sewn, and it couldn't do it this way. And so I got the old sewing machine out and was doing it. And but the thread for the needle wasn't long enough, so it came through. So now I had to thread the needle again. And I could hardly see that there was a hole in the needle. I know there's a hole there. And so, I had to thread that and, couldn't see. And so my self-talk was like, I don't know. I don't think this is going to happen now. I've got the sewing machine out. I'm going to be able to fix these pants. And so I was about ready to give up. And how sometimes you do the thread, and then the thread kind of gets all weird at the, and then so I cut it, lift it, and it went through. Oh. And so, there's a part of me that wanted to give up, but there's a part that said, let me keep on trying. So that was how determination showed up for me yesterday. I thought, well, how else does it show up? So it showed up this is February, so it showed up like 4 or 5 weeks ago when the Christmas tree, the artificial Christmas tree was in the living room, and I wasn't getting help to get it down. Last year it stayed up till like March or April. So this year I thought, I'm not having that. So I get the Christmas tree, and I'm determined as determined could be. I hauled that thing down the basement. And so, determination showed up, that day too. And then I thought, okay, how does determination feel like? What's that felt sense of determination? So, you just kind of go inside, and so determination feels in my arms. It's kind of like that, Okay, we're doing this. And so that's where determination feels. And it could be different for you. So then, okay, let me think of a different part. Now, I'm responsible. I'm really super responsible. Sometimes to the point where I don't want to be super responsible. But, okay, how does responsible feel? I thought, it just feels head to toe, like my whole self. And so how does responsible show up? Well, I'm there, and it's me being responsible gives my kids, that comfort that I'm gonna be there for them no matter what. So responsible then kind of felt good instead of like, there's Aaron, I'm always responsible. So, I had that relationship with responsible that, oh, okay. head to toe, it feels good. So, does that make sense? Okay, all right. So, so these are, you know, a list to just kind of get your, you know, brain thinking, that these are helpful parts. You know, being confident, being courageous, being determined, you know, being a forgiving person. You know, these are all helpful parts that are with us every day, but we probably just don't acknowledge it much. You know, again, probably not the only one in the room that, you know, tend to focus on the negative, not the positive. You know? So I thought this might be a really cool, you know, activity to do. So, all right. So, I did want to make sure that I follow along so that I don't get ahead of myself. And, okay. We talked about that. Okay, so you have, so if you want to move your chairs a little bit, you can, if you feel like you want some more space. But we're only going to, you know, so it's not hypnosis, but we are gonna, like you said, take some time to breathe and get centered, and then use your imaginations. So, if you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. If you want to stop doing it at any point, you can stop. And if by chance an unhelpful part shows up, just kind of say, okay, I see you, I feel you, you know, you're wanting my attention, but just kind of, you know, ask it to go back into the background because, you know, today's focus is on the helpful parts. So, alrighty. So yeah, we can probably turn that. Okay, good. So, here we go. So just go ahead and, you know, take a look around you, see your sense of safety. At any point, you can close your eyes, or if you don't want to close your eyes, you can just keep your eyes downcast. And we're just gonna, like I said, get calm so that self can show up. That calm, curious, caring aspect of self. Because we really want self to enjoy being with these helpful parts. So, just notice yourself in your chair, just tuning in. Notice your feet on the floor. Notice the temperature of your skin. This is all parts of just tuning in. And then just take a deeper breath, holding it a little bit longer, and breathing out slowly. Just noticing what happens as you're taking that deeper breath, holding, and having a nice slow release. And again, just following the breath as it enters and then it leaves. Just feeling that sense of connectedness to yourself, a sense of calm, sense of curiosity. Just allowing your breath to go back to normal. Just feeling a pleasant sensation of being here with yourself. go through this experience. There's no right and there's no wrong. It's just gonna be what your experience is. So now, if you like, imagine that you're standing on one side of a door, or maybe on one side of a trellis type archway. And then ask your helpful parts to line up so that they are on one side of the door or the archway. Or they can slowly walk through the door to meet you. Just imagine your parts kind of waiting in line. So your first helpful part walks through the door or under the archway, and it tells you its name. And you greet this part in whatever way feels right for you. Maybe it's a handshake, a high five, a hug, a pat on the back. And you take time to look at this part. Looking, maybe it has a color, a shape, a size. Maybe you see what age it is, or you have a good guess at what age it is. And so, you're just witnessing this part. You begin to relate to this part. And either you or the part brings up a memory that shows how it has shown up for you. I may give one example or more than one example. This part has been helpful to you in your life. So after you reminisce a little bit, just ask the part to have a seat nearby. And then your next part walks through the door, under the archway, tells you its name. You take the same amount of time to notice everything about it. Size, color, shape, age. And greet this part in a way that feels right for you. And notice if you sense a felt connection in your body to this part. And then either you or the part brings up a memory that demonstrated how this part has shown up and has been helpful to you. And as you reminisce, notice how you feel inside. Notice how you feel toward the part. And then when you're done, ask this part to have a seat nearby. And a third part walks through the door under the trellis and meets you. Greets you, telling you its name. And again, there's no hurry, there's no rush. Take time to notice everything about this part. like with age. And notice any of your body sensations as you feel connected to this part. And again, you or the part brings up some memories of how this part has served you and how it's been helpful to you. And after you've reminisced, ask this part to have a seat at the other parts. So most likely there's other helpful parts to greet. But just let them know how grateful you are that they showed up. And that they can have a special time with you on a different day. But if they'd like, they can go ahead and come on through and kind of take a seat or stand at the back where your other three parts are sitting. So you turn your attention to those three parts that you met. Maybe you'd like to raise a toast to them, giving them all your respect, thanking them for how they show up for you, honoring them. And or maybe you may want to just shine your warmth, your gratitude, and your love on them. As you really feel this sense of appreciation that these parts are here and have been so very helpful to you. And perhaps in turn, they may have something that they would like to share with you. And so, just tune in to hear what they have to say. Maybe you talk to them, maybe you talk to a good friend. Now just be quiet for a few more seconds so that you can just experience the experience of self being connected to your parts. And soaking up this pleasant experience. Trusting that what you're seeing or experiencing is what it is helpful to you. And when I count to 5, the activity will end. But 1, you're feeling the fullness and the richness of your experience. 2, you know that you can keep this picture in your mind if it will be helpful to you. 3, you begin to say your goodbyes, all the while knowing that your part's not leaving, you're still going to be there. 4, knowing how much easier it is to think about your healthy parts and to honor them. And 5, coming back to the room, feeling good, feeling the experience. So, it felt cool while I wrote it, so now I need to find out, how cool it really was to meet your helpful parts. I had to decide, well, is 3 good enough? Is 4? Is there any parts that no, don't forget me. Any of your feedback would be very, very welcome to know, what the experience was like. So, anybody want to go first? Or who wants to go first? Okay.
I think 3 felt like a good number.
Okay.
And then I liked where, you said if there was more, just let them come in and just tell them to
I got
see, and we'll talk later. So that was very helpful. And I've done, guided meditation things before, and I liked it. It was different, but it was nice. It was very nice.
Alright. Yeah. Any parts show up that you didn't expect, or like your
No,
top 3 strong parts show up?
yeah, leadership, curiosity and calm.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, so you're probably able to think of the experiences when calm, curiosity, leadership showed up. Good. Did they look certain ways? Did all 3 of them look different to you?
When you started talking about what they looked like as far as like age, they were different ages, which was really interesting. But they were color-wise, they all kind of had the same calm color, blue, green, kind of just peaceful. But there was a lot of different ages that was really different to me. That was interesting.
Yeah, it just really is cool when our imaginations just, do what they do.
Yeah, I think when you had your own example, you said, what was it? Was it discipline, was the first one?
Determination.
Determination. That was the first thing that came up with me. And then, it was funny because it said, I'll show you. And it was like, whoa. But then, the second one, I found was courage, and I thought that was interesting because what came up with that one was that anxiety, fear, but that I
I like the experience, I always like guided meditation and stuff. I happen to be, booked solid today, and so I'm thinking to myself, so 3 was great, because I'm thinking, okay, because I gotta go. And I had a hard time focusing as well as I wanted to, because I knew that I had to leave. It kept getting in there that, okay, I've got to get, going. And, so I think I'm gonna end up trying that a little bit this evening again, when I'm done with my stuff, and, do it that way. But, yeah, I do enjoy you and doing that kind of thing. And not that it wasn't bad at all. It was me that
Right.
couldn't focus on what was really supposed to be happening and stuff,
Yeah.
so.
And so in Park's language, there was a part that was worried,
Yeah.
and that worried part was interfering,
Yeah.
you know, but you know, that's okay, because, you know,
Just couldn't turn off.
yeah, right. Yeah, so again, not being judgmental or critical, it's just like, you know, when you start to talk in Park's language, you know, it just all makes sense. It makes it easier. All right, so I guess maybe time for just one more person to share.
I could think of 2, and I was trying to think of the 3rd.
Okay.
A lot of times my mind is rolling all the time, and it was just a very calming meditation, and I was focused on the words and as well.
Yeah, you know, sometimes parts will block us because we're just not ready. And so again, we just have different conversations with them. But yeah, for the sake of time, thank you. You were a very, very good audience, and I enjoyed your comments and your questions and your participation. And so, but I always ask this after you groups too. Was it helpful? Was there a particularly helpful part? So everybody has a good takeaway?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. All right.
Do you give this in other places?
No, this is my first.
Seemed like it. You did so well, you were so cool, calm, and professional, I thought you do this all the time.
No, but maybe I'm gonna do it again.
You're a natural.
I think it's very worthwhile, and it's also the fact that not beating ourselves up because we have these parts that aren't what we think they should be.
Right.
That, we can actually look at them and be grateful that they're there because they help us to get through life.
Right, right. Yeah, you know, most of us do survival, and when we're able to eventually go into the coping, then it's a different ballgame. But yeah, we're built to survive. We have lots of survival strategies to do that.
So when you were saying, like, when I said that, you know, I heard determination, and I heard, I'll show you. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about, that it speaks to you?
Yeah, it can, you know, like yours showed up in
Voice.
audio, voice, you
Yes.
know. And mine, you know, kind of showed up like, yeah. Yeah, because we're all a little bit different in that way.
In your presentation, you spoke about self, and where you get into that zone where you're doing something. That was very powerful, and how powerful self is. And a lot of times we don't trust it, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and again, what Richard Schwartz found was that self doesn't get damaged. Yeah, yeah. And, that we just need to learn how to get into that self energy again and to trust that. Yeah. Yeah, that part is powerful. Thank you all.
Oh, and you can